Well, welcome to my channel, Mispronounced Adventures. My name's Alex, and welcome to Arctic Season Round 4.
Which is going to be
That could have gone better. I'm in a ditch. So, much like all of my Arctic seasons, there are some upgrade videos which happened during it. The upgrade to this episode is to get my older Victron Orion DC-DC chargers, which have no connectivity to the Cerbo system, and also take care of the issue I've got with the smart regenerative charging with the smart alternator of my Transit, and I've now got a way to disable it. So let's get on with it. So what are my actual upgrade plans? I've got two of the old Orion 30 amp DCDC chargers, which live in this cupboard and look like this. And they don't have any connection to the Cerbo system, which is the screen you sometimes see in my videos, which is part of the Victron Venus OS. The new model, the Orion XS50, does have communication via VE Direct, and when you have that unit plugged in, you get a load of features, one of them being you get the new charging tile, which shows up and shows how much the alternator is charging your system, and a bunch of other bits and bobs as well. However, on my two older models, you can't do that. But there is a way to get it to show up as a charging tile. Before anyone goes, just swap them and upgrade. I'm planning on selling the van and building a new one this year, so I'd rather not have the expense and just keep the system, which I know works as it is. But one of the ways you can make those older ones show up is by using this device. Or, as many people might recognise, it's a Victron SmartShunt. Now, many people probably recognise the Victron SmartShunt because it's a very popular battery monitor. If your lithium batteries or AGM or lead acid don't have any form of communication, you can open your app and at 100% on the Victron app, it will show you what your battery is. This is the 300 amp newer version. It's a little bit smaller. Most people use the 500 amp version or the BV712. However, they have another feature not many people know about. This can be set to being a DC meter connected to the Cerbo system and then set to the alternator type, which gives you an alternator tile. It also means you could really add any brand of DC-DC charger and have it show up as an alternator charger on the Victron system. And it also works for a few other types as well. So same for solar charger, if you had a non-Victron MPPT controller or solar controller, if you use one of these and set it to DC metering mode and set it to solar, it would appear in the solar bar. Also means an extra feature for me, it's also going to give me a new window on and data logging of the starter battery, which I don't currently have. And starter battery voltage is the next bit of what we're going to be upgrading as well. Is earlier on this trip I had to replace my alternator as it broke, and that's when I've been paying a little bit more attention to voltages. I've been paying more attention to voltages because I put a new starter battery in, and the new starter battery has been healthy. The problem with that is it means my van goes into smart regenerative mode, or the alternator is being smart, which means the voltage drops a lot. Here's an example of it in reality whilst I'm driving. The ECU of the vehicle believes the starter battery is fully charged, so it's dropped the voltage down, as well as cutting the output of the alternator itself. As soon as I turn on the lights, the vehicle knows there's an additional load and the voltage rises slightly. I do get a little bit more power from the alternator, but not enough to have the chargers running at full. This is functioning exactly how smart regenerative charging should work, and this is how it's meant to be. But it's being a little bit too smart for my use case. And there is a correct way of disabling it. So as previously mentioned in the series, I popped into Ford. So the very nice man who I was working at the parts department has printed me a picture of what I need to get a cable, and they wanted £129 for that cable. However, I used my partner Jo as a parts mule when she flew out. Up point of Jo being here, she's also been my parts mule from the UK. And now we get the truth as to why I'm really on this trip. To bring me one that I found on eBay in the UK for £29, so that I can use the 8-way interface connector in the driver's seat, and bridging two of the wires there it's one of the correct methods listed in the DEMM manual for this van of how to turn off smart regenerative charging and turn on conventional charging, which means my DC-DC chargers will work properly. So that's the second part of the video. We're going to install that. And when Jo flew out, she also brought me a new wing mirror section and a new wing mirror indicator, because at the very beginning of this trip, on the way to the Channel Tunnel, I lost a jousting competition with an oncoming van and smashed the mirror and the indicator. So I've finally got those parts to replace as well. But first, let's do the Victron stuff. I was about to start doing all of this, and I've just noticed on my camera, on my front roof camera, that the northern lights are out. So let's quickly go see if the northern lights are in fact out, and then we'll get back to it. Oh yeah, a little bit. Northern lights are out a little bit. So this is the electrical hub. These are my two DC-DC chargers and their cooling systems. So I'm going to install a SmartShunt on this wire here. So this is the cable which joins my two DC-DC chargers from their individual cables into the main cable before it goes to the bus bar. Luckily for me, this uses M8 bolts to join those cables. And unlike the normal larger shunts, which is M10, this comes with M8 bolts, so I don't have to re-lug anything. It should, hopefully, just remove that block, put this in, and should connect up just fine. I have unplugged my chargers so they can't possibly turn on. And now let's get this off. There we go. Right, just need to unscrew that from there, separate those out, and then put the SmartShunt in. Of course, I've done these with a square drive. I generally do not know I have a square drive with me in the Arctic. Oh dear. Excellent, I do in fact have a square drive with me. No, I'm going to move this camera over because I can't see anything in this cupboard. Next bolt removed, but I forgot that these all clip together, so I've got to remove the top one to get to the bottom one, to get that middle one out. Right, space made. That's that one mounted. So let's get all these cables out of the way. Right, that's the shunt installed. I'll neaten up this cable management in a little bit. Next is the power wire, which is fused, so I'm just going to snip the end off, strip it, because I've got a little Wago connector I use as my little positive bus bar for low powered items off the battery terminal, so I can just put that into there. And there we go, powered on. The next wire is the aux one. So this can be used as a voltage monitor for the starter battery. Normally this is an isolated system, so there shouldn't be any voltage between the leisure system and the van's battery. This is the DCDC stuff coming from the van side of the electrics. However, I'm pretty sure one of my light bars has its case ground negatively fused, so this system is no longer isolated, and I'm fine with that. It doesn't need to be isolated. So I'm going to put this positive cable on the incoming stud coming here, so that should get voltage off the starter battery, so I can also now add starter battery voltage to the VRM. That's all that back installed. Final bit is the VE direct cable. So this is what connects it to the servo unit. However, oversight on my behalf, I thought this was male, so we could just plug into the top of the servo. Unfortunately, it's female and you're meant to have an extension cable, so that's not ideal. So in the meantime, I'm going to rob the VE direct cable off my solar controller because I'm in the Arctic and there's no sun, so I don't really need to know. Which is just here. Right, that's all plugged in. Let's look at the servo. Right, now on the Victron Connect app. Right, it's currently set as a battery monitor. I don't want it as a battery monitor, so settings, update, I guess. Right, SmartShunt, settings, initial setup, there we go. Right, battery. I don't actually need it to be a battery, I want it to go into miscellaneous. We're going to change it from battery monitor to DC energy meter. Since I've unplugged my solar, you can see that I've currently lost my solar tab, but change it from generic load, all these different options. I'm going to change it to alternator, okay. We've now got an alternator tab.
Right, let's go start the engine so the DC-DC chargers fire up and see if it works.
So you can see all the information on there. We can also click on here and get the information off there as well. So the voltage going out, the amps, those total watts, history. Yeah, success. Now that it's been added to the system,
it's time to look at the VRM, or the Victron remote monitoring. So the Cerbo and the VRM are slightly different. They have a lot of the same information, but they also do have the differences. The main thing I noticed was you get a lot more information directly on the Cerbo and the touchscreen in the vehicle from the DC meter than you do online at the minute on the VRM.
Well, the one disappointing bit at the minute I would say is it doesn't give you the alternator charging as a tile on here or show that as anything which is reduced power, but we'll see how that works out in the long term. Or anyway, to view the starter battery voltage. Actually, I was wrong. You can have a starter battery, so it's a custom widget which uses a parameter which isn't originally available. So whilst you don't have it as a normal widget available under this, when you set it to alternator mode, you can go into custom widgets and then you can make a custom widget which uses the alternator charger, so the SmartShunt, and then the parameter is auxiliary voltage. Oh, I was busy working on those projects and turns out the northern lights are on my camera. Oh, very, very faintly. Right, next project is to disable, or give me the ability to disable, the smart regenerative charging on my alternator. There is a correct way to do it for the Fords. So on my van you have a feature called smart regenerative charging inhibit, which can work a number of, one of them if you have the eco button and you hit that, that stops the start stop feature as well as smart regenerative charging. I don't have start stop on my van, but that still does it. The other way is using the interface connector. So I've got a pre-facelift 2018 Mark 8 Transit, whereas an 8-way connector. I believe the newer versions use a 10-way connector, but it's still got the same pin. And to use the smart regenerative charging inhibit feature needs pin 3, which is the signal pin, to be grounded to the vehicle chassis, or in this case, pin 1 on the connector is ground, and if pin 3's inhibitor signal is grounded, then smart regenerative charging inhibitor is enabled. You could cut the wires behind it and do it that way, but since there is a proper way of doing it, I have the cable or the harness for it, which is that part code if people are interested, which is also mentioned in here of the kit to get. And I'm just going to do it quite simply. I'm just going to put a switch on the end so I don't always have to use it, and crimp the ends of this. So from looking at the orientation of this, I need to use pin cable 3, which is the smart regenerative charging inhibit pin, which is the sort of purple and lilac, and the dark black and white, whatever, this one, purple with grey, purple with lilac, and black is ground. So at the other end we've got, there we go, these are my 2 pins I need, and let's just, and there we go. Well, if I now put this on, let's go ground for central, and let's do that one on that one. So that should be my little switch. I don't need to access it a lot, or if you wanted to, you could run it nice and neat. For other people who might want to know the other uses, or what you can do is one of the pins is a ignition on, one of them is an engine run, which is quite useful for DC-DC chargers as well. And I'm not entirely sure what IP switch illumination is. One's called vehicle speed. Not sure how you would use that. If anyone does know, do tell me. I'm not sure what Ford programmable battery guard feature is. But anyway, give it a quick test. All being well, this should beep. There we go. Right, it's all being well. When I plug this in, that should disable my smart regenerative charging. Problem I have is smart regenerative charging is built, that plug is inside the driver's chair, and to get there you need to remove the seat, the starter battery box, and then you can access that plug. So that will be a job for tomorrow.
And it's getting even more powerful.
Right, next job, fitting that 8-way connector, which means the chair's got to come off. It isn't really the end of the world, but it's just 4 bolts. 1, 2, which is not the most dignified thing. Not very cool. Away.
And Alex forgot to put the handbrake back on again. Unsurprisingly, this is not the first time I've had to use foot pedals with my hands. I once had to stop an out-of-control taxi whilst I was working in Romania. That's a story for a different day.
Note to self, it was flat with the handbrake off. The wind's just changed direction, and well, it decided it wanted to move, and I couldn't pull the handbrake up because this bar was in the way, so I had to use the foot pedal. Anyway, handbrake back on. The plug I'm after is that one on the right down there. Normally you have to take all of this off, then undo the battery, take the battery tray out. I think I might just be able to put my finger down there and do it. Right, a bit of cleaning first, because there's dust and everything down there. So hopefully I can just thread this in here, get it to seat nicely, would be nice. There we go. That worked a lot better than I expected. It's all nicely plugged in now. So run the cable somewhere I can use it and get the chair back on. Right, one chair back where it needs to be. I'm using third-party power mode activated by grounding a particular servant. By grounding a particular circuit. High power mode is accessed by installing the 12-way. I got the older van, which is the 3-way, into the pin 3 connected, driver's seat. So to actually test this, I needed to get it to go back into smart alternator mode, which is usually after like 15-20 minutes of driving, because it does do what it's meant to do, conventional charging to get the starter battery back up to where everything's full and then turn off again. So I need to trigger the smart alternator mode, and then once it's done I can pull over, look at my voltage reading, flip the switch, and I think wait 5 seconds, and hopefully I should then see the voltage rise and conventional charging turn off. So let's get the van started. 6 degrees. I just preheated the engine a little bit earlier. Yeah, 48. It should go nicely up all the way to 14 and probably stay there for a bit. And on the screen on the back, we should start seeing the alternator chargers come on. There we go. And auxiliary voltage, you can see, has gone up. Right. So the main things I want to test is when I've had it drop down, then those chargers turn completely off, and I'm not getting that much at all. But when I have the lights on, it goes up to about 13.6 volts because the engine thinks, or the also thinks it has got to do some work. I want to see if it's working by having that drop down to 0 and then turning the switch and see, hopefully this goes back up to this high amount. We should hopefully be able to see the effects of this as well running on this chart, which is going to be the voltage changes. Right, let's get driving for the day anyway and see if I can get smart regenerative mode to kick in and then test my switch.
In half a mile, turn right onto Chip.
Okay, I may have forgotten to take the... Oopsies. Right, this time we're going to go.
Turn right onto Chip
Right, smart charging has come on, so the engine's running. It's currently 12 volts because it's turned the alternator off. That means in the back, my DCDC charger has stopped. So, all being well, which means when I click this button in, I think I know which direction, this should wait 5 seconds and then turn on. So let's give it a go. There we go. Smart alternator charging disabled. Which should cause this to boot up in a minute. It took a little minute to creep up, but it went up from about that 600, 650 up to 700. So let's just turn this switch back off again. And if I return it to there, it should turn off again. Although I don't know how long it takes. Maybe it takes a bit longer to reactivate. Oh no, there we go. And that's pretty much everything. One thing that we'll bring up is, whilst you can have a signal live to the DC-DC charger and turn off the engine's detection mode on the Victron ones, that isn't the problem here. I actually have ignition lives running them. It's that even though they're on, they're already getting about 200 watt output. Because the alternator was off, there was nothing to pull from. There's no power there. They could just presumably just getting a bit from the starter battery. And the other thing to remember is using that SmartShunt, that whilst I have used Victron ones for the Victron system, you can use any DC-DC charger with those SmartShunts. I use the isolated ones. It will potentially be a bit different if you're using a non-isolated. It's going to be a little bit more difficult because if you just put that shunt on the common negative, you aren't going to get the current flow. You're going to have to put it on probably your leisure system's chassis bonding cable, or the cable between your leisure system and your chassis, because the only thing we should be using that will probably be the DC-DC chargers. Anyway, I'm going to get on with my day.
And that's pretty much going to be the end of this episode here, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you are new here, consider subscribing to the channel to check out the rest of the Arctic seasons, or the rest of this one, or or some of the other videos I make. Other ways you can help support the channel is I work for Roma, which is a UK lithium battery company, but my job to them is customer system design, where I help people plan the electrical systems for their vans. That's a service you can book. And I also use the Roma Extreme batteries in this van as well. Or I'm a brand ambassador for Autotherm, where I've reviewed their air heaters and diesel heaters, and a bunch of other links like Amazon and so on. But really, I just want to make content for you guys to enjoy. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye.